The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Raising his eyes toward his disciples, Jesus said, "Blessed are you who are poor, for the kingdom of God is yours. Blessed are you who are now hungry, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who are now weeping, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you and insult you, and denounce your name as evil on account of the Son of Man. Rejoice and leap for joy on that day. Behold, your reward will be great in heaven. For their ancestors treated the prophets in the same way. But woe to you who are rich, for you have received your consolation. But woe to you who are filled now, for you will be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will grieve and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for their ancestors treated the false prophets in this way." The Gospel of the Lord.
St. Peter Claver was from the Basque region of Spain and went to Colombia when he came to the New World to serve those who had been enslaved in Africa and were being trafficked in the slave trade. Today he's the patron of enslaved peoples, he's a patron of African Americans, and many other things. In Colombia, where the deacon is also from, tells me that he's the patron of lots of things in Colombia, and rightfully so, because he was a great saint and had an amazing kind of heroic generosity in serving those who were in greatest need. From his office of readings for his feast today, I just want to share with you, this is just a journal entry from a day in the life of this great saint. The other thing I wanted to mention to you briefly before I give you the saint's own words is that the bishops of the United States called for today to be a day of fasting, penance, for the cause of bringing justice to situations of racial injustice in particular. You think about the way that a whole group of people being enslaved from the foundation of our country is giving them a severe disadvantage from the foundations of our country, and trying to find ways to make that just, right? So at the very least, be able to pray for people who've been victims of injustice of all kinds, especially those who have been prejudiced and bigoted against just based on the color of their skin. That we'd be able to see each other as brothers and sisters in the Lord, be able to care for each other just out of our common humanity. Listen to the words of the saint. Yesterday, May 30th, 1627, on the Feast of the Most Holy Trinity, numerous blacks brought from the rivers of Africa disembarked from a large ship. Carrying 2 baskets of oranges, lemons, sweet biscuits, and I know not what else, we hurried toward them. When we approached their quarters, we thought we were entering another Guinea. We had to force our way through the crowd until we reached the sick. Large numbers of the sick were lying on the wet ground, or rather in puddles of mud. To prevent excessive dampness, someone had thought of building up a mound with a mixture of tiles and broken pieces of bricks. This, then, was their couch, a very uncomfortable one, not only for that reason, but especially because they were naked, without any clothing to protect them. We laid aside our cloaks, therefore, and brought from a warehouse whatever was handy to build a platform. In that way, we covered a space to which we at last transferred the sick by forcing a passage through the bands of slaves. Then we divided the sick into 2 groups. One group, my companion approached with an interpreter, while I addressed the other group. There were two blacks nearer death than life, already cold, whose pulse could scarcely be detected. With the help of a tile, we pulled some live coals together and placed them in the middle near the dying men. Into this fire we had tossed aromatics. Of those we had 2 wallets full, and we used them all up on this occasion. Then, using our own cloaks, for they had nothing of this sort, and to ask the owners for others would have been a waste of words, we provided for them a smoke treatment by which they seemed to recover their warmth and the breath of life. The joy in their eyes as they looked at us was something to see. This was how we spoke to them, not with words, but with our hands and our actions. And in fact, convinced as they were that they had been brought here to be eaten, any other language would have proved utterly useless. Then we sat, or rather knelt beside them and bathed their faces and bodies with wine. We made every effort to encourage them with friendly gestures and displayed in their presence the emotions which somehow naturally tend to hearten the sick. After this, we began an elementary instruction about baptism, that is, the wonderful effects of the sacrament on body and soul. When by their answers to our questions they showed that they sufficiently understood this, we went on to a more extensive instruction, namely about the one God, who rewards and punishes each one according to his merit, and the rest. We asked them to make an act of contrition and to manifest their detestation of their sins. Finally, when they appeared sufficiently prepared, we declared to them the mysteries of the Trinity, the Incarnation, and the Passion, showing them Christ fastened to the cross as he is depicted on the baptismal font, on which streams of blood flow down from his wounds. We led them in reciting an act of contrition in their own language. It's hard to overestimate the horrors of a slave ship landing in the New World. It's hard to imagine what it would be like to meet a group of people who had been so maltreated for so long. It's hard to imagine what it would be like to encounter a person who thought that they had been trafficked to a new place so that they could be eaten as food. And yet, as crazy as it all sounds, that was a day in the life of this saint. Blessed are you who are poor. Blessed are you who are hungry. Blessed are you who are weeping. Blessed are you when people hate you and when they exclude and insult you and denounce your name as evil on the account of the Son of Man. Those two are strange words. Imagine as these saintly servants served the slaves, that first they showed them affection, they showed them kindness, they helped meet their most immediate physical needs before they kind of offered some more kind of emotional encouragement, and eventually leading to a place where they could bathe their wounds and talk to them about the beauty of the gospel. To proclaim to them the Trinity and the Incarnation and the Passion, to propose baptism. Why is it so hard for us to do that? To talk to people about these mysteries? Maybe it's easier if you're a healthy person and you're ministering to a boatload of people who are on the edge of death. Maybe there's something more immediate about it. Maybe they're better listeners. But they didn't even speak the same language. Imagine in that more, I can't remember how he said it now, that more advanced instruction after the basics were through, to get into the Beatitudes. Blessed are you who are poor and hungry and weeping and hated. It probably actually would have made a little bit more sense to them than it does to us, because it would have been easier for them to see that those who were laughing and satisfied and those who were the ones who had been excluding them were running slave ships. That it's more blessed to be the victim of such a horrible thing than to be the perpetrator of it. It seems that some people have a difficult understanding of how over 100 years without slavery, that for some people it's difficult to see how black people still suffer as a direct result of slavery. You might say, well, they were never enslaved, or you might say, well, I never owned any slaves. I've never participated in, denigrating other people. You might say, what is it? Why can't they have every opportunity that every other person has? The reality is, if that was your beginning, right? If that's the foot you got off on, that you're already at a severe disadvantage. Like if you're not allowed to own property, if you're not allowed to vote for decades and decades and decades, that you remain very much at a disadvantage, financially, politically, and in just about every other way imaginable. It's not hard for us to see, you can see this in studies, that if you have somebody has a full-fledged addiction, that 4 generations at minimum of their family will be affected by that. Even if the alcoholic's great-grandson never meets the alcoholic, even if they go through recovery, they go work the steps and they find sobriety, there's still going to be an effect. Even if the son and the grandson never take a drink, even if they don't become alcoholics, there's still going to be an effect, because what happened in the family was psychological and emotional trauma. It's measurable across generations. When trauma is severe enough, we're finding this new study of epigenetics that your genes are transformed by trauma. That there's little genetic markers for trauma that get clicked on, and that after you experience that trauma and then reproduce, that those trauma genes are clicked on in your offspring. We've called that generational sin for years. We can see that with relative ease. I'm still confused why some people can't see that black people have been suffering for a long time, because there was a trauma that ran very deep. And that trauma didn't just go away when, when Lincoln freed the slaves. That trauma and all of its effects didn't just go away because racism was still alive and well, because Jim Crow was still alive and well, because redlining was still alive and well. It's difficult to imagine. It's difficult to put yourself in the shoes of a person who's lived with the effects of those things, unless you are one of those people, unless you have lived in their communities, unless you've befriended them and listened to their stories. At the very least, at the very, very least, on a day like today, when we honor St. Peter Claver, it would be good for us to remember them in prayer. It would be good for us to remember our brothers and sisters who happen to have black skin, happen to have gone through a terrible tragedy across an entire race in our country and in many other countries, and to pray for them, and to pray for true spiritual, psychological, emotional, physical healing. There's lots of political fuss made about the idea of reparations. And I would say, let there be no mistake, there's a lot of things that need repairing. By what means and to what end? I don't have an agenda on that level, except to say that at the very least, we need to be praying for that healing to be not just in black individuals and their families and their communities, but within the church, within the country, within our community. I think it was very wise of the bishops to pick a day like today where we honor and remember the great and heroic work of St. Peter Claver, and to allow ourselves to be inspired by his example. To take a day like today to set it apart as a day for fasting and prayer and penance, for true reparation to be made. If nothing else, we've got an opportunity to offer our communion tonight. We've got an opportunity to offer our adoration tonight. We've got an opportunity to offer our rosary this evening for healing across our country.